Parlays, player props, and predictions. The 4Ps are back for week 5, and last week we had an electric week. We cashed out our moneyline parlay at plus 633. Let's do it again on Sunday. Today I'm going to have my 4 favorite player props, another moneyline parlay, and a first touchdown score for Sunday Night Football. And we have a brand new segment debuting this week. Stay tuned for that. But without further ado, my name is Austin from Calling Our Shot. I appreciate you guys for coming out to this video. And you guys have been smashing the subscribe button and the like button all season long. Keep doing those two things if you are new. And if you're curious and you haven't watched my week 5 best bets video, which got posted on Wednesday with my favorite best spread picks for Sunday, definitely go check that out. We've been doing pretty good on spread and over-under picks this far this season. If you ever want any exclusive deposit matches or risk-free bets, definitely go down below. Look at all the different links we have. All the details are in the description. Go check it out. But without further ado, let's start off with some player props. I'm going to go to the Sunday Night Football game. I'm taking Joe Mixon, taking his over 20.5 receiving yards, minus 115 on DraftKings. Now on Thursday Night Football, we took a guy's over 20.5 receiving yards in Paris Campbell, and he got it done in overtime. Let's hope Joe Mixon doesn't have to wait until overtime for this one. But you look at Joe Mixon, here's a trend for you. He went over in weeks 1 and 2, and then went under in weeks 3 and 4. So by law, he's got to go over in the next 2 weeks, right? But you look at Joe Burrow and what he did against the Ravens last year. I mean, look at the numbers. 941 passing yards in 2 games. T. Higgins and Jamar Chase accounted for 582 of those 941 yards. And the Ravens have allowed the most passing yards so far this season, but I don't see a world in the divisional game where they let Joe Burrow and the Bengals come out and just abuse their secondary. I just don't. I mean, you look at the Ravens, they've heard and they've seen all the numbers. They can't play worse than they did last year. I think they're going to come out and play some inspired football. But that likely leads to them playing deep and not letting Jamar Chase and T. Higgins get past them. So I think we see some soft coverage, and I could see some passes going to Mixon's way. You look at Mixon; he's played 83% of the snaps so far this year, or last week, 74% on the year. So he's out there a whole lot. And Mixon quietly hit this over in 5 of his last 6 games versus the Ravens. While he hasn't had a lot of success on the ground, which a lot of teams don't. Baltimore is one of the better run defenses in the league, but he's had a lot of success through the air, and I think he can get that done this week. Now, Mixon's reception line sitting at 3.5, even value on each side, minus 110. And look at since 2019, Mixon, when he has 3 or more receptions, which he's done in 20 games, hit the over in 13 of those 20 games. That's 65%. And if he gets up that 4+ receptions, which would be hitting that over at minus 110 odds, he has a 73% conversion rate of hitting this over. So look at running backs against Baltimore. Done pretty well. You look at Devin Singletary last week, 4 receptions for 47 yards. Ramondre Stevenson hit it. Raheem Mostert, Breece Hall, Michael Carter. All these guys have hit this over versus Baltimore this year as a running back coming out of the backfield. I think Joe Mixon could certainly get it done. All it needs is 1 reception, and that he could potentially take that for 25 yards. But I think it's a couple more than 1. So Joe Mixon, over 20.5 receiving yards. That's my Sunday Night Football play. We'll talk about a first touchdown score in a little bit. Now let's go to another star running back, taking his rushing yards, and that's Dalvin Cook. We're taking over 77.5 rushing yards, minus 115 on DraftKings. I think Dalvin's doing a pretty big day. And for all the people that have him in fantasy football, I think you're going to be treated nicely, because I have him in a couple leagues and he's been hurting me good. But so far this year, look at his rushing yard numbers: 90, 17, 96, and 76 so far this season. And he's going to be taking on the Bears this weekend, and that's great for him because the Bears give him up the most rushing yards per game in the NFL at 133 or 183.3. Running backs versus the Bears this year, look at the numbers. 146 rushing yards for Saquon last week, 80 for Dameon Pierce the week before, 132 for Aaron Jones. A.J. Dillon even pitched, and I think almost 60 in that game. And the 49ers didn't have a workhorse back in that week 1 as they had Trey Lance there, but they ran for 176 yards in week 1. Now, Dalvin has hit this over in 4 straight games versus the Bears, so he has their number. And despite having that shoulder injury, still locked 62% of the snaps last week and saw 20 of the Vikings' 23 rushing attempts. So if they're going to run the ball, it's likely going to be through him and not Alexander Madison. You look at his rush attempts line, set at 17.5, juiced on the over, probably goes up to 18.5. Let's reduce that down to 15. In his last 25 games with 15+ rushing attempts, hit the over in 20 of those 25 games. The Vikings, minus 350 on the money line. Well, I'm not saying the Vikings easily win this game or whether they, cover the spread. If they do win, Dalvin has hit this over in 9 of their last 10 victories. I think they should get it done. Should at least have some positive game script coming his way. So I like Dalvin Cook to get over 77.5 rushing yards, maybe even gets over 100. His only miss that he didn't hit that in the Saints victory was last week when he missed by 2 yards against a very good Saints defensive front. That's not what he's going to see this week from the Bears. So give me a Dalvin Cook over 77.5 rushing yards. Now let's move on to another player prop who's due a bounce back in week 5. That's Devonte Smith of the Eagles. We're taking his over 51.5 receiving yards. It's minus 110 on BetMGM. Now, last week we saw Devonte Smith put up a dud. only 17 yards, 3 catches, 4 targets, and the weather wasn't great. There were some iconic clips that went out that he was complaining about it being cold. That shouldn't be the case in Arizona. They play in a dome, / I think they can open the roof, but either way, he's going to be pretty good. He won't be cold in this game. And look at the same kind of scenario happened in week 1. He had a big 0 yards, and then they said, we got to get him the ball. And that's what he did the next 2 games, 80 and 169 receiving yards. Hopefully do that again in this one. Now, Arizona has allowed the 5th fewest rushing yards this season, and that's slightly deflated thanks to the Panthers running for like 40 yards last week. But Arizona has a decent defensive front led by J.J. Watt. And prior to last game when they faced the Carolina Panthers, they'd also been allowing 281 passing yards per game, which would be 3rd most in the NFL. So you can beat them in the air, and I think that's what we're going to see out of the Eagles on Sunday. Now, you look at Devonte Smith's other lines, which I like to kind of use to kind of be a breakdown for how the books think he's going to perform. His 3.5 receptions over, sitting at -135 in DraftKings. I see sharper books at -160, -170. So I imagine that climbs up to that value. So let's look at Devonte Smith. He's at this over 51.5 receiving yards and 11 of 14 career games with 3+ receptions. Now keep in mind, only 3 receptions would cash that under for his receptions, which let's say he gets up to 4 or more, hit this in a perfect 10 of 10 in his career. I think he gets 4 receptions after a low kind of volume day. Last Sunday, I think he gets back to the groove of what we've seen out of him in weeks 2 and 3. It's also worth noting the Cardinals have done a pretty good job of number 1 wide receivers. You saw them clamp up Cooper Kupp. He only had like 44 receiving yards. You saw them do well against Devonte Adams. Large in part, they did well because it was Byron Murphy Jr. He's been pretty good so far, shutting down that opposing number 1. Imagine he goes to A.J. Brown. See Devonte Smith have a pretty good day. So we'll be riding with them. I think the Cardinals actually can stick around in this game and not make it a blowout like we've seen the Eagles do over the past couple weeks. So give me Devonte Smith over 51.5 receiving yards. All takes is 1. I think he gets at least 3 or 4 catches on Sunday. Now, my final player prop of the week, we're going across the pond and going to London as we'll be taking Aaron Jones over 57.5 rushing yards, -115 on BetMGM. Now, Jones and the Packers, like I said, are in London. So if you're potentially watching this after, they kick off at 9:30 Eastern time, you can skip forward a couple minutes to that moneyline parlay and what in the new segment. But let's talk about Jones, and hopefully he's treating us nicely if you're watching this after the game's already started. But you could go A.J. Dillon or Aaron Jones here, but I like the explosiveness from a guy like Aaron Jones, who could get this in one run with just 1 carry. Look at his game log so far: 49, 132, 36, and then 110 rushing yards. 6.8 yards per carry is what I like to see. And what I also like to see is he's had 12+ carries in 3 straight games. So if he can continue that volume, I think he's got a good chance. Now, obviously, he's gone over then under. And, he did go over last game, and he didn't go up. He did go under in that Bucs game, but Bucs have a very good, defensive front. So I think he should get back into the groove. And you look at the time, he's been splitting time with A.J. Dillon, but still playing 61% of the snaps. And Jones hit this over 57.5 yards in 16 of his last 25 games with 8 or more rushing attempts. I think Jones at least gets 8, hopefully more than that, maybe 12 to 13, 14, 15. We should easily be able to crush this line. He's also hit this over in 11 of his 13 games with 13 or more carries, which he's done twice this season. So I really do think Jones has a good chance against this Giants front, which Giants defense, allowing the 5th most rushing yards per game in the NFL. I don't think they're going to be able to stop this Packers offensive line, which has been slightly improving and getting their guys healthy. And look, every running back with 10 or more carries versus the Giants this year has hit this over. That includes a guy like Tony Pollard, which doesn't get a lot of touches, but did in a game versus the Giants. He had 105 yards versus them in week 3. So I really do think the Packers, we're going to see some positive game script as the Packers are 8-point favorites. So they should be up. And even if they aren't, they shouldn't be getting blown out. They should be still sticking to the run, given their wide receiver depth. So I really love Aaron Jones. I think he gets it done over 57.5 rushing yards. I think he has a pretty good day across the pond. Now, that was my 4 player props. I do have a 5th. I did post this on Twitter. Tyler Higbee over 4.5 receptions. I don't want to really include it in this video, but I wanted to at least put it out there in case the line is still favorable for you. It was -137 on Caesars at the time of posting. I imagine it goes up to like -160, -170, which might be a little bit too juiced, but I think he gets that done. Now let's move on to a moneyline parlay. Last week, we smacked it. +633. Let's do it again. We're going +546 odds in these 5 teams. We're going Vikings, Patriots, 49ers, Rams, and Ravens. Now, Vikings taking on the Bears. I think they get that done. The Bears have been very anemic offensively so far to start the year. And while the Bears might cover this for no reason, I do think the Vikings get that done. Now, Patriots, look, I will give you a spoiler for my Week 5 Best Bets video. I like the Patriots on the spread. I think they get the win against the Lions. Then the 49ers versus the Panthers. Look, maybe the Panthers cover, but it's going to take a miracle. The 49ers are a much better team, headed top to bottom. I think they get that done. Rams money line versus the Cowboys. Can Cooper Rush stay undefeated? I don't think so. I think the Rams coming off a bounce back will get it done. And the Ravens taking on the Bengals. I think a little bit of revenge for that Ravens team as they lost both games. They got blown out by the Bengals both last year. Plus the Ravens have been just losing close games. I think they get it done at home. And plus, if we ever get to the Sunday Night Football and we hit the other four, you can always hedge and guarantee some profit. So definitely something you can check out. We'll see exactly when Sunday Night Football comes around. But speaking of Sunday Night Football, my first touchdown score, and I bet you guys want to know who it is. Now, we missed our Thursday night touchdown score as no touchdowns were scored. But we like Mark Andrews on the Sunday night game. Now, I don't really have odds for him at the moment, but let's talk about why we like Andrews. Now, he has 3 touchdowns this year, so he's got some touchdowns. And last week had a bad week. 2 receptions, 15 yards against the Bills, good defense. I think they try to get him going early in this one. And he had 125 yards and a touchdown in his last game versus the Bengals. And I just think he's going to be in there at the goal line in case it's like you're running, full, you have no wide receivers. It's just going to be tight ends and linemen. He's going to be in those situations, and he'll be in an obviously all passing situation. So Mark Andrews, could he sneak into the end zone? First touchdown, I think so. Caesars is the only book with odds right now, but I don't really like Caesars first touchdown odds. So maybe wait until we get better odds. Obviously, tweet out the odds I take on at Call on our Shot. Make sure you're following us. Now, let's move on to the news segment, and I'm sure you're going to be waiting for this one, but I'm going to title this Make It Make Sense. The purpose of this is to find lines that haven't hit all season long. And I'm not talking like, oh, we're going to take Marcus Mariota under 300 yards at minus like 500. I'm talking about lines that are even value on each side, minus 110 to minus 130, that haven't hit at all this season. And we're just going to see what happens if you were to take the opposite. Now, we're looking at these. These are the 3 that I found on the slate. Ryan Tannehill's over in rushing yards, Dallas Goedert's under in longest reception, and Dalvin Cook's over in longest rush. Now, please don't take any of these. We're just doing this as an experiment. I'm going to be honest, I'll probably sprinkle on a parlay of all 3 hitting. But if you look at on the screen, all 3 of these have not hit at all this season. They're both, all 3 are 0-4. So if you were to take these exact props, just as straight bets, you'd be 0-12 this season. You'd be losing the shirt off your back. But there's a reason they're set this high. I don't really know, or low. I don't know. It's going to be interesting. We're just going to see how this segment pans out. I have some homework for you guys. If you have any props that you see haven't hit at all this season, or right around that minus 110 to minus 130, drop them down below in the comments. I'll throw them into a spreadsheet, see how these do. I'm just purely trying to see if the books are handing out free money, if they're trying to trap people into these lines. So these are the 3 I'll track, plus any others you guys leave down below in the comments. But that's going to do it for this video. My 4 player props, first touchdown score, money line parlay. Let's have a great Sunday. I appreciate you guys as always for coming out to the video. I have some more videos popping up on the screen, plus Monday Night Football best bets will be live later on Sunday night. We appreciate you guys as always. I'm Austin, and I'm signing out. Peace.